AITA for revoking a loan in my name after my wife pressured me to fund her brother? I'm Mateo, 40. Jillian and I had been married for 10 years, and our daughter, Maya, was 6. For most of our marriage, money had not been the thing we fought about. We had disagreements like anybody else, but we were usually careful with each other when it came to finances. The house fund was the best example of that. We had started it years earlier, before Maya was old enough to remember. It was not some giant pile of spare money we could replace in a few months. It was tax refunds, the money from selling my old car instead of trading it in, bonuses, birthday cash we didn't spend, and all the ordinary little decisions that don't look impressive by themselves. We kept the older furniture. We skipped a couple of trips. We fixed things instead of replacing them. Jillian once spent 3 evenings comparing insurance rates to save us less than $100 a month, then celebrated like she had won something. Maya had given the fund a personality without knowing it. At some point, she decided our future house would have a bedroom with a window seat. She had seen one in a children's book and became obsessed with the idea of putting stuffed animals along the ledge and reading there. Not just a chair by a window, she would remind me. A seat that is part of the window. I told her I understood the engineering requirements. So when I say I wouldn't give Jillian's brother $58,000, it wasn't because I had $58,000 sitting around that meant nothing to us. It was because that money represented years of choices made by 2 adults for the household they had built together. The problem was that Jillian's family had a different definition of together. Her older brother, Darius, was 35 and had been the family emergency for as long as I had known him. He wasn't useless, and he wasn't some cartoon disaster who woke up every morning looking for a new way to ruin his life. That would have made things easier. Darius could be funny, generous when he was doing well, and genuinely good with Maya. He was also impulsive with money and deeply allergic to admitting when a decision had gone bad. Every crisis was temporary until someone else paid for it. Early in my marriage, I had loaned him money for a car repair because he said missing work would cost him more. He paid some of it back, then stopped. Renee, Jillian's mother, called the remainder temporary help for so long that eventually everyone acted like there had never been a loan. Another time, Jillian and I covered part of a utility bill for her parents because Darius had promised to handle it and hadn't. Then there was a moving truck, an insurance deductible, and a few smaller things. None of them destroyed us financially. That was almost the problem. Every time we absorbed one, the family learned that asking us was easier than solving whatever pattern caused the emergency. Renee was 64 and had a gift for making obligations sound like affection. She didn't usually say, "Give us money." She said things like, "This is what family does," or "One day Maya will see how you showed up for people." If Jillian hesitated, Renee knew exactly where to push. "You were always the dependable one." That sounded like praise, but it was really a job assignment. Frank, Jillian's father, was 66 and quieter. For years, I mistook his silence for neutrality. Later I realized silence could be a choice too. The house at the center of everything was the home Jillian and Darius had grown up in. Renee and Frank had lived there for decades. Holidays had happened there. Jillian had scratches on a doorframe from measuring her height as a kid. There was a loose kitchen drawer Frank had supposedly been going to fix since the 90s. Maya knew the place as Grandma's house. About a year before the fundraiser, Renee and Frank moved into a smaller place. I understood that Darius had moved into the old house and was taking care of it. That phrase turned out to be doing a lot of work. The first real ask came on a Sunday afternoon. Renee and Darius were at our place. Maya was coloring at the kitchen table. Jillian had made coffee. I remember the normal details because of how quickly the conversation stopped being normal. Renee put both hands around her mug and said, "We need to talk about the house." I assumed she meant repairs. Darius leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling for a second. "There's a refinance deadline," he said. "I need to get some numbers cleaned up." "What numbers?" I asked. He looked at Renee. Renee answered for him. "There were some expenses. The market changed. You know how these things go." I didn't know how numbers went. They usually had amounts attached to them. "How much are you asking for?" Jillian was looking down at her coffee. Renee said, $58,000. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. $58,000? "It would protect the family house," she said. I looked at Darius. "Protect it from what?" He rubbed his jaw. "There's debt tied up in it. If the refinance goes through, It gets reorganized and I can get back on track. What debt? Mateo, Renee said, already irritated. We are not here to put Darius on trial. I asked what the debt is. Darius gave me a number, but not a breakdown. It was higher than I expected and vague enough to make me more concerned. Then Renee said the part they had apparently already discussed without me. You and Jillian have the house money. You could take out $58,000. The refinance closes, and the property stays in the family. I looked at Jillian. She finally met my eyes. I told them we would talk about it, she said. I kept my voice level because Maya was 10 feet away. You told them we would talk about giving them $58,000? I said we would discuss options. Renee sighed. This is not some random purchase. This is the house Jillian grew up in. I said, I'm not saying no to helping. I'm saying no to blind money. Darius laughed once, without humor. What does that mean? It means I want to see the deed, the current loan statement, the other debt you're talking about, what the refinance actually does, and a repayment plan. I also want to know who else is contributing. Renee's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Why would you need the deed? Because you're asking for $58,000 to save a house. It's our family house. That is not an answer. Frank wasn't there that afternoon, but I remember thinking I would call him later because he was usually easier to talk to than Renee. Darius pushed his chair back. You either trust us or you don't. That is not how $58,000 works. Jillian whispered, Mateo. I looked at her. Would you give my brother $58,000 without seeing one piece of paper? That question landed harder than I intended. Renee stood up. You always make everything transactional. I said, you came to my kitchen asking for money. She left angry. Darius followed. Jillian waited until Maya went to her room before she turned on me. You didn't have to interrogate them. I asked basic questions. You made my mother feel like she was trying to scam us. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Your face said it. I took a breath. Jillian, if everything is exactly what they say it is, the paperwork will make that obvious. She crossed her arms. You keep talking like this is math because it wasn't your childhood home. That was the first time I understood how differently she and I were looking at the same request. To me, it was a financial decision involving nearly everything we had saved toward our next home. To Jillian, it was a threat to the place where she had Christmas mornings, scraped knees, and family photos in the hallway. She cried that night, not theatrically, quietly, while sitting on the edge of our bed. She told me about hiding under the dining table with Darius during thunderstorms, about Renee making pancakes on Saturdays, about Frank teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway. I listened. Then I said, I believe it matters to you. I'm not mocking that. But if it matters enough to risk our savings, it matters enough for them to tell us the truth about the debt. She wiped her face. What if the truth is just that Darius messed up? Then he needs to say what he did. You know how mom gets when she thinks he's being attacked. That can't be the reason we stop asking questions. She didn't answer. For the next 2 weeks, nobody gave me documents. What I got instead was pressure. Renee called Jillian repeatedly. Darius texted me links about refinance timelines as if I had agreed to participate. Frank changed the subject twice when I asked him directly what was owed on the property. That was the first thing that bothered me beyond the money. Frank wasn't a good liar. When he wanted to avoid telling you something, he got vague and practical. Numbers move around. The lender is sorting it. Darius has the latest paperwork. One evening, I asked, Frank, whose name is actually on the house right now? There was a pause. Then he said, it's still the family house. I said, that is not what I asked. He started talking about property taxes. Jillian became more defensive each time I brought it up. She wasn't secretly draining our account. At least not then. But she started treating my questions as proof I had already decided against her family. You want a spreadsheet for everything, she said one night. No, I want proof before we hand over more money than we have ever given anyone in our lives. You know they would help us. I looked at her. Would they? She hated that question. A few days later, Maya climbed onto the couch beside me while I was looking at houses online. She pointed at one picture and said, that room could have the window seat. Maybe. Then she asked, are we still getting it? Getting what? Our house. Eventually. She frowned. Grandma said maybe the house money has to save Grandma's house first. I closed the laptop. Grandma said that to you? She said it when she was talking to Mommy. I was coloring. That was when the whole situation stopped feeling like an argument between adults. I told Maya, money stuff is grown-up stuff. You don't have to worry about Grandma's house or our house. Is Grandma going to be homeless? No. That answer I could give honestly. Renee didn't even live there anymore. Maya thought about it, then asked, "Can I still have the window seat?" I said, "That is still the plan." Later, I asked Jillian why Renee was talking about our savings around Maya. She wasn't talking to Maya. She was talking where Maya could hear. "You are making this bigger than it is." "No, I'm trying to keep our 6-year-old from thinking her bedroom plan is competing with Grandma not being homeless." Jillian looked exhausted. "My mother is scared." "So am I." That surprised her. I said, "I'm scared that nobody will tell me what we are actually being asked to step into." The pressure kept building. Renee started calling relatives. I knew because Talia, Jillian's cousin, texted me one afternoon. Talia was 42, sensible, and normally stayed out of family drama. She wrote, "I heard things are bad with the house. Is there a reason you won't help?" I replied, "I asked for the deed, debt statements, refinance terms, and a repayment plan. I have received none of them." She took a while to answer. Then, that is not exactly how it was explained to me. I almost asked what Renee had told her, but I decided I didn't want to spend my life chasing every version of myself being distributed through that family. I wrote, "I figured." Jillian hated that I wouldn't defend myself more aggressively. "People think you are being cruel," she told me. "Then show me the paperwork and prove me wrong." She pressed her fingers to her forehead. "Why do you keep coming back to paperwork?" "Because $58,000 is not a feeling." That line made her walk out of the room. Looking back, I can admit something I was doing wrong too. I had spent years believing calmness was the same thing as handling things well. If Renee pushed, I got quieter. If Darius made some reckless decision, I would help once and tell myself I was choosing peace. When Jillian got caught between her mother and me, I often backed off because I didn't want our marriage to become a contest between husband and family. I thought patience would eventually teach them where the boundary was. It didn't. It taught them I would complain softly and then absorb the inconvenience. The fundraiser was where that stopped. Maya's school fundraiser was on a Friday evening in the multipurpose room. It was a typical school event, with folding tables and rows, paper plates bending under the weight of food, and parents clutching strips of raffle tickets. Silent auction baskets lined one wall, and children darted through the room in packs while adults tried to finish their conversations. Jillian had volunteered, so we arrived early. Renee came later with Frank. I didn't know Darius was coming until I saw him near the raffle table. I should have known then that somebody intended to talk about the house. For the first hour, nobody did. I helped Maya spend an unreasonable number of tickets trying to win a stuffed bear. Jillian moved between tables. Renee chatted with parents she had met at school events over the years. Darius stayed close to Frank. I remember thinking maybe everyone had finally understood that a school fundraiser was not the place for it. Then I heard Renee say, "We can't wait another week." We were sitting at one of the long tables near the back. Maya had gone to look at the silent auction baskets with a friend. There were other parents within easy hearing distance. I said quietly, "Not here." Renee ignored that. "The lender needs proof the money is available," she said. Jillian looked at me. "Mateo, we need to settle this." "I have already told you what I need." Darius leaned forward. "There is no more time for your conditions." "My conditions are documents." "Same thing with you." I started to stand. Jillian said, louder than she needed to, "Can you just stop acting like everyone is trying to steal from you?" A couple of people at the next table glanced over. I sat back down. "Lower your voice." Her face was flushed. I could tell she had been worked up before the conversation even started. She said, "I'm tired of begging you to care." That hurt because it wasn't true, and because she knew it wasn't true. "Jillian, I have not refused to care. You are too selfish to save my family's house because every dollar has to go exactly where you want it." Now more people were listening. I remember looking at her and realizing she had decided the crowd was useful. She later denied planning it. I believe her mostly. I think Renee had spent the evening feeding her the idea that if I felt how serious everyone thought it was, I would finally give in. Renee didn't miss the opening. A real husband does not let his wife's family lose a home. I said, our daughter's future is not a spare account. Renee's mouth tightened. Then don't call yourself a husband. There are insults that make you angry immediately, and there are insults that make everything in you go quiet. That one did the second. Frank stared at his plate. Darius looked away. Jillian didn't defend me. Then I saw Maya. She was maybe 20 feet away near the raffle table. I couldn't tell how much she had heard, but she was looking directly at us. I stood. This conversation is over. Renee said, of course you are walking away. I didn't answer. I went to Maya and asked if she wanted to check the bear drawing. She said yes, but she kept looking past me at Jillian. We stayed another 15 minutes because leaving immediately would have made Maya feel like something terrible had happened. She didn't win the bear. I bought 2 cookies I didn't want. I talked to another dad about parking. Jillian barely looked at me. The drive home was worse. For the first few minutes, nobody spoke. Then Jillian said, you embarrassed me. I almost laughed. You stood up at our daughter's fundraiser and called me selfish in front of strangers. I was upset. Your mother told me not to call myself a husband. You know what she meant? No. Tell me what she meant. Jillian turned toward the window. She thinks you are abandoning us. Us. My family. I am your family. I know that. Do you? From the back seat, Maya said, Daddy? Both of us stopped. What bug? Are you making Grandma sad? I felt something in my chest drop. No. But she said you won't save the house. Jillian closed her eyes. I said, Grandma and Uncle Darius have a grown-up money problem. Mommy and I are figuring out what we should do. None of it is your fault, and you don't have to fix it. Is Grandma going to lose her house? I chose my words carefully. Grandma has a place to live. The other house is something the adults are talking about. Maya was quiet. Then, in a small voice, are we still getting the room with the window seat? Jillian covered her mouth with her hand. I said, that is still something we want for you. When we got home, I put Maya to bed. She asked why Grandma was mad at me. I told her adults sometimes disagree about money and say things they shouldn't say. I didn't tell her Renee was wrong. I didn't tell her Jillian had betrayed me in public. She was 6. She deserved to sleep. After her door was closed, Jillian and I went to the kitchen. I said, your mother does not discuss our finances anywhere Maya can hear them again. Jillian looked drained. You can't control what my mother says. I can control whether Maya is around her. Her head came up. Don't threaten me with my daughter. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you I will not let a 6-year-old be used to make me feel guilty about money. She wasn't used. She just asked if I'm making Grandma sad and whether she is losing her future bedroom because of me. Jillian didn't have an answer for that. I was too angry to keep talking, so I went downstairs and cleaned a counter that was already clean. That was when I noticed an envelope pushed under a stack of school papers near the end of the counter. It had our address, my name and Jillian's name, and the lender's return information. I picked it up. Jillian moved faster than I had seen her move all evening. That is nothing, she said, taking it from my hand. I stared at her. What is it? Just something they sent because Mom listed us as possible contributors. Why is a lender sending me something if I haven't agreed to contribute? I don't know. What did it say? I haven't really read it. She tucked it under the school papers again. That was the moment my anger changed into suspicion. Not because of the envelope itself. Mail gets generated automatically. People make mistakes. It was the way she had grabbed it. I said, give it to me. She hesitated. Jillian. She handed me the envelope. It had already been opened. Inside was a notice referencing an asset verification request. There was language about consent and documentation still pending. I read it twice. What consent? She shook her head too quickly. It might be standard. Did you submit anything with my name on it? No. It was an immediate answer. I wish I could say I knew she was lying. I didn't. I wanted to believe her. I put the notice on the counter and said, I am contacting the lender Monday. Her face tightened. Please don't blow this up before we understand it. Then help me understand it. She said nothing. My phone buzzed before I went to bed. It was Darius. You really had to do that tonight? I replied, do what? Make a scene and act like you are pulling out at the last second. I sat on the edge of the bed and typed, pulling out of what? His response came almost immediately. Your approval is already in the file. Don't play dumb now. If you tank this, that is on you. I stared at the words, your approval is already in the file. Then I wrote, what approval? The typing dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Ask your wife. I didn't answer. Jillian was in the shower. I walked to the dining table, opened my laptop, and started with our email. We had a shared household account for bills, insurance documents, school notices, and things we both needed. I searched the lender's name. There were 2 emails I had never seen. One was a generic request for asset verification. The other referenced a consent submission and a proof of funds review. The messages had been marked red. I checked the trash. Nothing useful. Then I searched our bank alerts. There had been no $58,000 withdrawal, but 2 days earlier the bank had generated a review notice related to a requested cashier's check amount. It had not been completed. I felt cold. Jillian came out of the bathroom and stopped when she saw the laptop. What are you doing? I turned the screen toward her. What approval is already in the file? Her eyes moved across the email. Mateo. What approval? She sat down slowly. I was going to tell you after it was stable. That sentence answered more than she meant it to. After what was stable? The refinance. You submitted something in my name. She looked at the table. I submitted consent for them to verify the account. Using my name? It was just to show the funds existed. That is not what I asked. She started crying. I didn't raise my voice. Did you authorize something as me? She wiped her cheeks with both hands. There was an old electronic authorization from when we'd done paperwork before. I had access to the documents. I thought it was just verification. You thought you could reuse my authorization for a different loan involving your brother? I knew if the lender could see the money, we would have time to get you comfortable with it. I stared at her. Comfortable with what? Giving away $58,000. It wasn't giving it away. Darius was going to pay us back. Where is the repayment plan? He was working on it. Where is the debt statement? I don't have all of it. Where is the deed? She looked away. That was the second time that night I felt the floor shift. You know something about the deed? No. Jillian. She pressed her palms to her eyes. I knew Dad and Mom transferred it. To who? Darius. When? I don't know. Months ago. I just looked at her. All those conversations about the family house. All the statements about saving Renee and Frank's home. All the guilt aimed at Jillian about losing her childhood home. Why didn't you tell me that? Because it is still our family house. On paper, whose house is it? Darius's. Why was it transferred? He was taking over the expenses. That is not an answer. I don't know every detail. Then why are you trying to move $58,000 into it? She snapped. Because I thought I was saving my family. I said, you were risking ours. She flinched. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, I didn't think of it as signing your name. What did you think it was? Using consent we already had. For something I had not consented to. She looked ashamed. I thought you would calm down once it was handled. That sentence may have damaged our marriage more than the paperwork itself. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. The plan was not to persuade me. The plan was to get far enough down the road that saying no would become too expensive and too embarrassing. I stood up. Don't touch the house fund. I wasn't going to take it without telling you. You already tried to make it part of a loan file without telling me. That is different. No, it is the exact reason I can't take your word for that right now. She started to say something, but I held up a hand. I need facts. I went to the other room with my laptop. I didn't sleep much. The first thing I did was look up the property records. I had never needed to research a deed before, but the public record wasn't hard to find once I knew what I was looking for. I searched the property, confirmed the parcel, and found the recorded transfer. 8 months earlier, the house had been transferred to Darius. Not recently. Not during the current emergency. 8 months. That meant Renee had called it our family house through months of conversations while knowing Darius legally controlled it. I saved the record. Then I went back through texts. There was one from Renee to Jillian that Jillian had forwarded to me accidentally weeks earlier inside a longer conversation about dinner plans. I had ignored it at the time. Once he sees everyone is counting on him, he will not embarrass you. We just need the lender to know the money is there. At the time, I thought everyone meant the family trying to persuade me. Now it read differently. I saved that too. Then I called Wes. It was late, but Wes had been my closest friend long enough that he answered with, "Somebody better be bleeding." Nobody is bleeding. Then this had better be interesting. I told him enough to explain what I had found. His first response was silence. Then, "Don't send anything angry tonight." "I'm not going to." "Don't threaten Darius." "I'm not going to." "Don't start calling the whole family." "I'm not going to." He paused. "You sound terrifyingly calm." "I'm trying to figure out what is real." "Good. Keep doing that. Save the original emails. Save the texts. Get the public record from the actual record source. Call the bank. Call the lender. Don't build your case out of what angry people say on the phone." That was exactly what I needed to hear. I wanted to do something dramatic. I wanted to wake Jillian up and demand every password. I wanted to call Renee and ask what kind of mother teaches her daughter that using her husband's name without permission is an act of loyalty. Instead, I made a list. Lender. Bank. Property record. Legal advice. No family argument until I knew what had actually been filed. That list probably saved me from making the situation worse. Early the next morning, before anybody from Jillian's family was awake enough to call me, I sent a written notice to the lender stating that I had not authorized my name, signature, electronic consent, asset verification, proof of funds, or financial contribution for Darius's refinance. I asked them to revoke and disregard any consent attributed to me unless they could produce direct authorization from me. I didn't accuse anyone of a crime. I didn't pretend to know exactly how their system worked. I said one simple thing in several precise ways. I did not consent. Then I contacted our bank. I told them there was a dispute concerning possible use of our savings as proof of funds and that I wanted additional controls on large transfers from the house account while Jillian and I sorted it out. Because it was a joint account, I couldn't magically turn it into my private property, and I didn't try. The bank explained what protections were available. We added an additional approval requirement for certain large movements and removed a pending cashier's check request that had not been finalized. That request bothered me almost as much as the lender consent. Jillian had not taken the money, but someone had gotten close enough to the mechanics of taking it that our bank was reviewing a cashier's check amount. When Jillian woke up, I told her what I had done. She stared at me. "You contacted them already?" "Yes." "You could have given me one day." "To do what?" "To fix it." "How?" She had no answer. I said, "If you want to call the lender and tell them yourself that I never consented, do it. But I was not leaving my name in a file for one more day." Her voice broke. "You know the deadline is Monday." "I know." "You know what this will do." "I know what your family says it will do. I still don't know the full debt." "Mateo, please." I looked at her. If the refinance only works because a lender believes I approved my assets and I didn't, then it doesn't work. She sat at the table with her head in her hands. For the first time, I didn't feel satisfaction at setting a boundary. I felt sick. I loved Jillian. That was what made it hurt. If I had thought she was simply a bad person, there would have been nothing to untangle. But I knew the woman who had built that savings account with me dollar by dollar. I knew the daughter who had spent her life being told that her job was to keep everyone steady. I could understand how she had gotten there. I just couldn't pretend that understanding made it acceptable. By breakfast, the lender had responded. The file was being paused pending review of the consent and proof of funds. The refinance was frozen. Darius called before I finished my coffee. I let it ring twice, then answered. "You just killed the house," he said. "No hello." I said. "I stopped my name from being used in a file I never approved." "You knew the money was going in." "No. I knew you wanted money. Those are different things. You were going to say no no matter what. I asked you for documents. You wanted to humiliate me. I asked you privately." He made a sound like he was trying not to yell. "The lender froze everything because of you." "No. The lender froze it because the consent in my name is disputed. You had to make me look like a criminal?" I didn't call you a criminal. You know what this looks like. I know what it looks like from where I'm sitting. He hung up. Renee called next. I didn't answer the first time. She left a voicemail saying the house was about to be lost because I had decided to punish Darius for one financial mistake. The second time she called, I answered. She said, I hope you are proud of yourself. I'm not. You have destroyed something this family spent a lifetime building. Whose name is on the deed? She went quiet. Then, that is not the point. It is one of the points. Darius owns it because we trusted him with it. 8 months ago. Another pause. You went digging through public records? I checked who owns the property you wanted $58,000 from me to save. That is exactly what I mean about you. No heart. Just documents. You told people I was refusing to save your house. It is not your house. It is my home whether a piece of paper says so or not. You don't live there. You know what I mean. I know the story you told me. Her voice hardened. I did what any mother would do. For which part? You think you are clever. No, I think my name was used without my permission. She changed direction immediately. Jillian is devastated. So am I. You are her husband. You are supposed to protect her. From what? From losing her family. I said, I'm not stopping your family from helping Darius. I'm stopping them from using me. Then I ended the call. Frank called an hour later. He was quieter. This got out of hand, he said. I agree. Paperwork gets messy. That doesn't mean anyone meant harm. Did you know the deed had been transferred to Darius? Silence. Frank. Yes. That one word made me angrier than anything Renee had said. Did you know Jillian and I were being asked for $58,000? Yes. Did you know they were describing it as saving your family home? It is the family home. Did you know my name had been submitted to the lender? I knew you two were supposed to be helping. That is not what I asked. He sighed. Mateo, this could have stayed inside the family. I almost couldn't believe he had said it. Your wife and daughter turned it into a public argument at a school fundraiser. Renee gets emotional. So do I. I still didn't stand up in front of parents and call her a bad mother. This is not helping. No, Frank. It is not. He was quiet again. Then he said, your timing did more damage than the mistake. That sentence stayed with me. It was the family's whole system in miniature. The problem was never the thing somebody did. The problem was when somebody else refused to absorb it quietly. By noon, Jillian had cried, yelled, apologized, withdrawn the apology, and cried again. I was not much better. I didn't yell, but I was cold enough that I'm sure it felt like yelling to her. At one point she said, you are treating me like I tried to steal from Maya. I said, I'm treating you like you hid a financial consent from me and tried to make our savings part of your brother's loan. I didn't move the money. You tried to create the expectation that we would. I thought once you saw the house was actually at risk, you would understand. You knew the deed was in Darius's name. I knew Mom and Dad had transferred it. I didn't know he had borrowed against it the way he did. What did you know? She sat at the kitchen table and finally gave me the version she should have given me weeks earlier. Renee and Frank had transferred the house to Darius 8 months before because they wanted to simplify things and because Darius had been living there and paying some of the expenses. Jillian had been told it was a clean transfer. Afterward, Darius had used the property in connection with additional borrowing. Jillian said she knew there was debt. She said she didn't know how much of the refinance was tied to the house itself and how much was meant to clean up other obligations. Did you ask? I said. She looked at me. I asked Mom. That is not what I asked. No, I didn't ask Darius for everything. Why? Because every time I did, Mom said I was making him feel like a failure. I sat across from her. And every time I asked, you said I was being cold. She started crying again. I know. That was the first apology I believed. Not because it was complete. It wasn't. But because she didn't follow it with but. I said, you need to understand something. Your mother may have manipulated you. That doesn't erase what you did to me. I know. You decided I didn't get to make my own choice because you thought you knew what I would say. I know. You helped them put my name into a process after I had explicitly asked for information. I know. I leaned back. I don't know what happens to us after this. She covered her face. Neither of us said the word divorce. That almost made it worse. That weekend, Jillian went to stay with Talia for a few days. It was not something I ordered. We both needed space, and Jillian said she couldn't think with Renee calling and me looking at her like I didn't recognize her. I told her I didn't want her staying with Renee. She gave a bitter little laugh. Trust me, I don't either. Before she left, we told Maya that Mom was sleeping at Cousin Talia's for a few nights because adults sometimes needed quiet when they had a big disagreement. Maya asked if we were getting divorced. I hated that she knew the word. I told her, we are working on things. You didn't cause any of this. Jillian knelt beside her and said the same thing. Then I said, and there is something else Mommy needs to tell you. Jillian looked at me, then at Maya. She said, I should not have talked about Dad the way I did at your school. Grandma should not have either. Dad is not making bad things happen because he wants to keep our money safe. Maya looked between us. Are you mad at Daddy? Jillian swallowed. I was. But being mad does not mean I get to say things that make you worry about him. Maya accepted that with the strange practicality children sometimes have. Can I call you tonight? Yes. Then she asked if she could have cereal for dinner. The next several days were ugly in ordinary ways. I paid for a consultation to understand what I should document and what options I had if my name showed up anywhere else. I changed passwords on accounts that were mine alone. Jillian and I agreed in writing, just between us, that neither of us would authorize, pledge, transfer, promise, or represent joint savings to anyone without the other's direct approval. For future contributions, I stopped depositing my portion into the existing house fund and set up a separate savings account in my own name until we could rebuild trust. That was not a victory. It meant the account we had built together no longer felt safe enough to keep building together. We also stopped covering the small family expenses that had become automatic. No more utility gaps. No more temporary transfers. No more paying first and discussing repayment later. Renee took that personally. Of course she did. Talia called me on the third day. Jillian was still staying with her, so I assumed the call would be about our marriage. Instead, she said, Do you actually have proof about the deed? Yes. And the lender consent? I have the emails and the notice. I have my written revocation. I don't have every internal lender record. Renee says you agreed and changed your mind to punish them. I didn't agree. Can you prove that? I thought about Wes telling me not to build anything out of angry phone calls. I can prove what was sent to me, what I wrote back, what the public record says, and what Darius texted. I can tell you what I didn't authorize. I am not going to invent the parts one can't prove. Talia was quiet. Then she said, That is a lot more specific than what I have been hearing. I am not arguing with the version of me your aunt is distributing. I'm not asking you to. There was another pause. Jillian is a mess. I know. She also knows she crossed a line. I know. Are you done with her? I don't know. That was the truth. Talia didn't push. Before hanging up, she said, Renee wants everyone to have dinner Sunday to clear the air. I actually laughed. What? You know that means she wants me to apologize. I know. Is Maya invited? She said everybody. Maya is not coming. Probably smart. I almost refused to go. Wes told me I would be justified. Then he asked, What do you want out of it? Not an apology. Good, because you probably won't get one. I want them to stop telling people I randomly destroyed a family home. Then bring what you can prove and keep your mouth shut about anything you can't. That sounded simple. It was not. On Sunday, Jillian came by before dinner to pick up clothes. She looked tired. I asked, Are you going? Yes. With your mom? Talia. That mattered to me more than I expected. I said, Maya stays here. Agreed. Your mother does not get access to her for now. Jillian winced. Mateo. No, not after the fundraiser and not after Maya was made to think I was taking a home from Grandma. She is her grandmother. And she used that relationship to put adult pressure on a 6-year-old. She didn't do it on purpose. I don't care whether it was a plan. It happened. Jillian looked down. For how long? I don't know. Until we can trust that she will keep this away from Maya. She didn't like it. Neither did I. But she nodded. The dinner was at Renee and Frank's place. I drove separately. That detail sounds petty, but it was not. Jillian and I were not arriving as a united couple pretending everything was fine, and I didn't want to be trapped in a car with 3 people after whatever happened. Talia was there. So were 2 other relatives who had heard enough of Renee's version to have opinions. Darius arrived last. No Maya. No children at all, actually. For once, everyone seemed to agree that was a good idea. Renee had cooked too much food. She did that when she wanted to control the temperature of a room. If people were eating, she could act like everyone was still a family around a table. We made it through maybe 8 minutes of small talk. Then Renee put down her fork. I think we all know why we are here. I said nothing. She looked at me. What happened this week did not need to happen. I waited. She continued. Darius was days away from saving a home. That means something to all of us. Mateo decided to contact the lender behind Jillian's back and sabotage the refinance. Talia glanced at me. I said, "Are you done?" Renee looked offended. "I'm trying to have a respectful conversation." "Then finish your version." Darius muttered, "There it is." I ignored him. Renee said, "I want this family to understand that one person's stubbornness has consequences. Darius may have to sell because Mateo withdrew support at the last possible moment." Frank said quietly, "We all made mistakes." That was when I asked the first question. Whose name is on the deed? Renee's face changed. Darius leaned back in his chair. Frank looked at his plate. I asked again. Whose name is on the deed? Darius said, "Mine." One of the relatives looked at Renee. She said, "That doesn't change what the house is to this family." I didn't ask what it means. I asked who owns it. Darius said, "You know I do." "I know now? When was it transferred?" "Why does that matter?" 8 months ago." He stared at me. Talia said, "Is that right?" Frank answered this time. "Yes." Renee snapped. "We transferred it because Darius was taking responsibility for it." I looked at Darius. "After it was transferred, did you borrow against it?" He put his fork down. "This is exactly what I said would happen. You want to put me on trial in front of everybody." I asked a question. "You want me to list every mistake I have ever made?" "No. I want to know why $58,000 from my household was needed." Renee cut in. "To save the house." I looked at her. "From debt created after Darius became the owner?" She said, "There were repairs. There were expenses." Darius said, "There were several things." "What things?" He gave me a hard look. I reached into my jacket pocket and took out a manila envelope. Not because I was trying to stage a courtroom reveal. I had printed a few things because passing my phone around a dinner table seemed ridiculous. I took out the public deed record and set it near the center of the table. "This is the recorded transfer." Renee said, "We know what it is." Talia leaned forward to read it. I said, "For weeks, I was told I was refusing to save Renee and Frank's family house. On paper, it had already been Darius's for 8 months. Renee said, "Paper does not erase history." "No, but paper tells a lender who owns the collateral." She glared at me. I took out the lender notice. Second question. Why did the lender have a consent to verify assets in my name before I agreed to contribute? Nobody answered. I looked at Jillian. She looked back at me, eyes red but steady. "I submitted it," she said. Renee immediately said, Jillian was trying to help. Jillian turned toward her. "Mom." Renee ignored her. She knew you would never agree if we didn't get far enough to show you this could work. That was more direct than I expected. I said, "So you knew." I knew she was helping with the paperwork. "Did you know my consent was being represented?" I knew there was an authorization. There was an old electronic authorization for unrelated household documents. Renee shrugged. "You are making a technical issue sound sinister." Talia said, "Why was his consent needed before he agreed?" Renee looked at her. "Talia, please." "No, I'm asking." That was the first visible crack in Renee's control of the room. I slid the lender email over. The lender asked for proof of funds connected to that consent. They had reason to believe my assets were part of the transaction. I told them I had not agreed. They paused the file. Darius said, "Which killed the refinance." I didn't tell them to deny you. I told them not to use me. You knew what would happen. Yes. There it was. The part people could argue about. I could have waited. I could have given Jillian a day to try to unwind it herself. I could have let the deadline pressure me into being gentler. I didn't. I said, once I knew my name was in a financial file without my permission, I was not leaving it there to protect your deadline. Frank rubbed his forehead. This could have stayed private. Talia looked at him. It was private until the fundraiser. Frank had nothing to say to that. Renee shifted in her chair. Fine. Jillian made a mistake because she was desperate. Darius made mistakes because he was trying to keep the house. None of that changes the fact that Mateo had the ability to save it and chose not to. I said, we still haven't reached the full reason for the refinance. Darius's expression went flat. That was when I knew there was more. I had suspected it from the vague statements, but I didn't have the details. So I didn't accuse him. I asked, was all of the refinance for debt directly tied to the house? He said nothing. Renee said, debt is debt. I looked at Darius. Was all of it for the house? No. Jillian turned toward him. What do you mean, no? Darius rubbed both hands over his face. It was going to consolidate some other stuff. What other stuff? Jillian asked. He looked at Renee. Renee said, this is not productive. Talia said, it feels pretty productive to me. Darius snapped, credit cards, okay? A personal loan. Some business debt. It was all going to be rolled into something manageable. Jillian stared at him. You told me the refinance was to stop the house from being taken. It was. You told me the $58,000 would close the gap. It would have. On what? He was angry now, but underneath it I could see embarrassment. The lender wanted better reserves and a lower payoff position. The money would have fixed the ratios and let me clear the other stuff. Jillian looked at Renee. You knew? Renee said, I knew enough. Jillian's face changed. Not the way it had when I showed her the deed. This was different. This was the moment she realized she had not just been hiding things from me. Things had been hidden from her too. You told me it was the house, she said. It is the house, Renee replied. No. You said if we didn't help, everything Dad built would be gone because Darius had one bad loan. Darius said, it's not like I was gambling. Nobody had accused him of gambling. That defensive sentence told us how desperate he felt to distinguish his choices from something worse. I said, what was the personal loan for? He looked at me. You don't get to audit my life. You are right. That surprised him. I continued. I don't. As long as you don't ask me to put $58,000 and my name into it. Renee said, you enjoy this. I looked at her. No. You have been waiting to prove you were right. No, I wanted to be wrong. She scoffed. I took out my phone and opened the text Renee had sent Jillian. I read only the relevant line. Once he sees everyone is counting on him, he will not embarrass you. We just need the lender to know the money is there. Then I set the phone down. You didn't want my agreement. You wanted enough pressure around me that refusing would become the embarrassing choice. Renee's expression hardened. I was trying to keep my family together. You called me selfish at my daughter's school. I was angry. You told me not to call myself a husband. I said what I felt. Then you don't get to complain that I answered with facts. She opened her mouth. Talia spoke first. Is the record wrong, or are we mad that he found it? Renee stared at her. Talia continued. Seriously, is the deed record wrong? No. Is the lender email fake? No. Did Mateo agree before his name was submitted? Renee said, he was going to be part of the conversation. That is not what I asked. For the first time, Renee had someone other than me refusing to accept her wording. Frank finally spoke. I knew about the deed. Jillian looked at him. Dad, he looked miserable. I knew Darius had the house. I knew there were other debts. You knew Mom was telling me it was about saving the house. Frank didn't answer. Jillian's voice cracked. Dad, did you know she was not telling me all of it? He said, your mother thought if you knew everything at once, you would panic and refuse. Jillian laughed once. It was an ugly, shocked sound. So you lied to me because you thought I might make the wrong choice if I had the truth. Renee said, don't use that word. What word? Lied. What should I call it? I was protecting Darius. Jillian looked at her for several seconds. Then she said, "From me?" Renee's answer was immediate. "From being judged." Jillian pushed her chair back from the table. I didn't enjoy watching that. This was the part people miss when they imagine revenge as a clean feeling. Jillian had betrayed me. She had also just learned that the loyalty she had risked our marriage to prove had been manipulated with incomplete information. Both things were true. She looked at me. "I thought I was saving my family." I said quietly, "You were risking ours." Her eyes filled, but she nodded. Renee said, "There, you got what you wanted." I turned to her. "No, what I want is simple." I put the papers back in the envelope. No money from our house fund. No consent from me. No use of my assets as proof of anything. No representing to any lender, creditor, relative, or anyone else that I agreed to contribute. Darius looked away. I continued. "And Maya is not part of this again. Nobody tells her I am making grandma sad. Nobody tells her money for her future should save somebody else. Nobody uses the fact that she loves you to put pressure on me." Renee said, "You can't keep my granddaughter from me. I can limit contact while you are involving her in adult financial pressure. You are punishing me." "I am protecting her from this argument." Jillian said, "Mom, stop." Renee turned toward her. Jillian's voice shook. "He is right about Maya." Renee looked genuinely stunned. That was probably the first time in years Jillian had sided against her mother in front of the family. I stood. Darius said, "So that is it? You just walk out, and I lose the house." I looked at him. "You still have choices. Sell it. Negotiate with your creditors. Find financing that doesn't depend on me. Ask the family members who think I am cruel to contribute." One of the relatives looked down at his plate. Darius said, "You know none of them have that kind of money. Then maybe they should stop volunteering mine." Renee called that cruel. Maybe it was sharp. I had spent weeks being told that family meant everybody should sacrifice, but somehow the only sacrifice being treated as mandatory was ours. I looked at Darius. "You used the word family when you needed my money. You used paperwork when you thought I would stay quiet. Now you can use the truth." That was the sharpest thing I said all night. Then I left. The refinance did not restart. At least not with me attached to it. The lender reviewed the disputed authorization and removed my assets from consideration. I was not given Darius's private financial details, nor should I have been, but the practical result was obvious. Without the money they had expected from us, and without my assets supporting the file, the deal they had built no longer worked. Darius spent the next few weeks talking to creditors and looking at alternatives. In the end, he put the house on the market while trying to negotiate enough time to avoid a worse outcome. He did not become homeless. He did not lose everything. He did lose the ability to keep a house he had treated like a private financial tool while asking the rest of us to treat it like a sacred family trust. Some relatives still blame me for the timing. One told Talia that I could have waited until after the refinance and then worked out repayment privately. When she repeated that to me, I asked what leverage I would have had after $58,000 was gone and my name had already helped close the deal. She said, "I know. I'm just telling you what people are saying." Renee never gave me a clean apology. The closest she came was, "I should not have said what I said at the school." Then she added, "But you have to understand how desperate I was." I told her I understood desperation. I did not accept it as permission. Frank did apologize, eventually. Not dramatically. He called me one evening and said, "I knew more than I told you. I kept thinking staying out of it meant I was not choosing a side." I said, "You chose the side that benefited from your silence." He said, "I know." That was enough for the call. Jillian and I started counseling 2 weeks after the dinner. The first session was awful. She wanted to explain her mother. I wanted to explain the paperwork. The counselor kept bringing us back to the same question. What had Jillian believed gave her the right to make a decision for me because she expected my answer to be no? Jillian finally said, "I thought if I could get everything far enough along, he would see that refusing would hurt everyone." I said, "That is exactly the problem." She looked at me. "I know." Trust did not come back because she cried or because Renee had misled her too. We changed how we handled money. Large transfers required both of us to approve them. Neither of us could promise joint money to relatives without written agreement from the other. We kept the old house fund intact, but access was more restricted, and my future savings stayed separate for a while. That hurt Jillian. It hurt me too. Every new rule was evidence that an old assumption had died. She also agreed that Renee would not have unsupervised time with Maya until we were confident the financial drama would stay away from her. Visits restarted slowly, with one condition that was not negotiable. Nobody discussed the house, the refinance, or my supposed selfishness around our daughter. Renee complained that I was controlling access to family. Jillian surprised both of us by saying, "Mom, you helped make her afraid her dad was taking your home away. This is not about punishing you." That was one of the first moments I believed our marriage might survive, because she finally stopped treating every boundary with Renee as a betrayal. Darius sold the house several months later. The sale covered enough for him to resolve the immediate crisis, though not without consequences. He had to deal with the remaining debt himself, and for the first time since I had known him, Renee could not quietly turn his problem into a family collection. I never celebrated the sale. Jillian cried when the listing went up. So did Frank. Even I felt something when the house was gone. I had spent holidays there too. A deed can tell you who owns a property. It cannot tell you what memories are attached to it. But memories do not sign loan papers. That distinction became the difference between sympathy and surrender for me. The fallout cost us money too. Counseling was not free. The legal consultation was not free. Our house search stopped while we reorganized finances and figured out whether we were still building the same future. For a while, I didn't know if we were. There were nights Jillian slept in the guest room because I could not stop replaying the moment she said, "I was going to tell you after it was stable." There were days she got angry because she felt like every financial conversation had become an interrogation. Sometimes I was too suspicious. I can admit that. Once, she bought a new appliance for the kitchen after the old one broke, and I asked 3 times which account she used. The look on her face told me I had turned caution into something harsher. I apologized. She said, "I know why you asked." I said, "Knowing why does not make it fair every time." That was what rebuilding looked like for us. Not forgiveness in one speech. Corrections. Months after the fundraiser, Maya found me sitting near the living room window with a tape measure. She asked what I was doing. I told her I was measuring the space. For what? I showed her a small reading chair I had found online. It had a padded seat and storage underneath. It was not built into a window, and she pointed that out immediately. "This is not a window seat." "I know." "You said a window seat is part of the window." "I remember." She looked suspicious. I said, "The real one is going to take longer. This is for now." She climbed onto the chair after I put it together and arranged 3 stuffed animals beside her. Jillian stood in the doorway watching. By then, we had restarted our savings plan under the new rules. The amount was lower than it would have been if none of this had happened. The house was farther away, but the money was ours again in a way it had not felt for months. Jillian came over and touched the back of the chair. "She is going to outgrow this before she gets the real one," she said. "Probably." Maya looked up from her book. "No, I won't." We both laughed. It was a small sound, but it felt normal. I did not end my marriage that year. I also did not go back to the marriage we had before. The version where I stayed quiet to prove I was reasonable was gone. The version where Jillian treated pressure from her mother like a family emergency we had to absorb was gone too, or at least she was working to leave it behind. There are relatives who still think I was too cold. Maybe they are right about parts of it. I revoked the consent before Jillian had a chance to correct it herself. I froze the path to money right before Darius's deadline. I brought records to a family dinner and made private failures impossible to keep private. Those choices had consequences. So did theirs. The difference was that I was finally willing to let consequences land where the decisions had been made. Maya's little reading chair is still by the window. It is not the seat she imagined. It is not the house Jillian and I thought we would have by now. But nobody else gets to pledge it, borrow against it, or call us selfish for keeping the promise behind it. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.